If you have been taking a look at this slide, you'll notice that Jenny has updated it. So just to kind of show you where we've been and where we're going, we have definitely come a long way. I'm excited that we're on day 8 and that we're in July. It is still 60 degrees here in the mountains, so we haven't quite hit summer yet. Today we're going to talk about educational research, IRB, and also setting up for some post meetings. Tomorrow we're going to talk about sharing and revising, and also tomorrow is our half day. So let's go ahead and jump right in. As I mentioned, we're going to talk about educational research today, and also within talking about our educational research goals, we're going to talk about IRB. IRB stands for Institutional Review Board. Some universities may hang on to an older title called Human Subjects Review Board, HSRB. That is a federal mandate for any research on science or social science, and kind of navigates or dictates how we do research on students, which you probably have not been thinking a lot about the research component of this project, but I have. And so we'll be talking about that today, kind of catching you up on what our plans are for collecting data, whether you're implementing in the fall or the spring. So we'll kind of make sure we're all on the same page there. And then, of course, in the afternoon, we'll do some more sharing in our groups. So our goals for today are to share our experience with IU's grants from NSF. Imad and Dave have both had lots of those grants, and they're quite successful at getting them. And as an early career faculty, I can also say that they're great mentors in helping you to think about things like that. So if that's an interest, somebody had requested talking about educational research in our poll on Friday, which is why we decided to make sure that we kind of address that here today. We also will talk about the data collection measures that we're going to ask you to collect in either the fall or spring when you implement your module. And we will together write an email to your IRB to begin the process to get approval to collect those data, except in a few cases where we already have IRBs for your institutions. And that email is already drafted. It's a cut and paste kind of thing. And then we're also going to select dates for our post-hackathon meetings. You'll remember that in the call for fellows, we had outlined that we'll have 4 post-hackathon meetings. This is where we'll kind of have a workshop type presentation of your modules, which I think will be really exciting to see all the great work that you've done. So we're going to go ahead and do our check-in here. Jenny is asking, what remote work practices are helping keep you sane and motivated? Jenny, can you give us an example of a remote work practice that people might think about?
Well, for me, I have I've kept my same dedicated work hours. I've just tried to keep the routine as same as I possibly could as when I was traveling to school to go to work.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Great. So any kind of strategies you're using, and Jenny, I'll let you share your screen so that can pop up.
Sure. Beer again. And someone has completely lost their sanity, I see. Outdoor office, I like that. I wish I could do that. Lunch with family, that's a good point. We weren't able to do that before. Who has a broken leg?
That's the interesting thing about Zoom workshops, right? We got been together for almost 2 weeks and I did not know anyone had a broken leg. Who has a broken leg?
I have to admit, it is me.
Oh, Willie. How did you break your leg?
I was walking, hiking, and rolled my ankle on a big honking root. But I'm 80% recovered now, according to the doctor. And
Well, that's a plus.
I'm just in regular gym shoes. This is no basketball, dancing, and running right now.
And stay away from those big honking roots.
Yeah. Well, that would be hiking in woods, so I'm not going to do that in a boot.
Yeah.
I did something similar like 2 years ago. I rolled my ankle. It's embarrassing to admit this. I was in a baseball field and I was stepping off the metal bleachers and I completely rolled my ankle. It was very embarrassing. I even chipped a bone on the side of my foot. I had to get it out.
Yikes.
Oh.
Well, it sounds like people have got.
As far as broken legs, it's the one. It's a one level broken leg.
Sounds like people have lots of good strategies that they're engaging in to help keep their sanity. Jenny, would you go ahead and stop sharing, because Imad is going to talk to us now about how to win an IUS grant.
Okay. Do you want me to show my own screen, Jenny?
I thought that might be easier.
Right, and I should use the same link that I have. Okay. So
actually, maybe I'll share. Sorry, I'll share mine because the poll will show up on my slides.
yes, please, please. And I would just take back what Melissa said, because I don't claim I can help you win any grant. You know, I can share my own experience, but and I asked Melissa, so do we have the poll first, Melissa, or before, after this? Maybe the poll first, you know. Yeah, I'm sorry if I...
All right, I put the slides in the wrong order. I apologize. So take a minute and let Imad know if you have an interest in submitting education-focused grant proposals.
This will decide whether I should talk for the next few slides or not, really. I'll talk anyways, but at least I know what the expectations are. Okay.
Nobody wants to answer no. Oh, there we go.
There you go. I think that's almost everybody, Melissa. Okay. 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 Well, that gives us a good idea, you know, that there is an interest in the group. And I don't represent NSF or anything like that, but I just wanted to share with you guys my own experience. The fact that you signed up for this workshop indicates that you have an interest to improve the way you teach. And I thought if you have an interest in pursuing your own research grant, I can share with you my own experience through this journey. And, you know, one thing I would put out there, you know, you pursue these types of grants if you are genuinely interested in it, right? Because it is time consuming. It's, you know, it's not an, you know, the success rate of these proposals are just like any other program from NSF. I sat in one of their webinars and they presented numbers on success rates of education versus research. They were all the same, really, you know, so they are not any easier, and they take a lot of time, just like any other proposal. And if you win them, and you will win if you're at a good proposal, you know, you'll have to do the work. And you know, if like I said, if you are not genuinely interested, I think everybody is, you know, then think twice. Unfortunately, they may not be as appreciated as the research grants in our own field. So that's also another thing that you have to take into account before you commit yourself to it. So the main program that we have, and again, I'm not an NSF manager. I don't claim that. The main program that we got our grants from was this IUS. It's an acronym for Improving Undergraduate STEM Education, and EHR is the Human Education and Human Resources. You can actually see it here spelled out. So the main focus is undergraduate education. So if you're doing grad education, or if your focus is on graduate education, this is not the right program. This program has evolved over time. From the very first grant I got with them in 2008 until now, they went through different evolution of the program focus and the program name. But this is the primary program, and it has, what I like about it, and I think this is now becoming common in NSF calls for proposals, they have these levels, level 1, level 2, level 3, or phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. And I started with phase 1, and then I went to phase 2, and then this program that we are running now is a phase 3. And I encourage you to go through that cycle. It's very unlikely that you will land a grant with a phase 3 or phase 2 if you did not go through phase 1. And it kind of builds your own knowledge of the field also, if you're interested. And as a matter of fact, they actually have an open call for proposals. And there's a workshop, I think, or I guess it's a webinar, right? Offered by NSF. It's on July 2016. This is the best place actually to get information. And they actually have a special call for proposals for those who have never gotten any grants from this program before. So if you are thinking about it, that's not a bad time, to check this out. This is the link to the webinar. I received it through my own email, and I think they have a Dear Colleague letter that talks just about that. Level 1, building capacity tiers. Encourage submissions from investigators and institutions that have not received prior IUS funding. Just some tips on, again, you can probably join the webinar and you will learn a lot more than what you can hear from me. But like I said, I went into phases. I started with phase 1 in 2008. Doug he's in the phone. He was my partner at that time with a couple other colleagues here at UL, and thank them for all the hard work and the inspiration. Actually, I had to learn a lot about education research, not necessarily the hardcore education research, but how to frame your proposal within evidence-based research and theory about changing how people learn and how people teach. So NSF actually put a very nice document that I read over and over when I was writing the proposal for this program back in December 2 years ago or 3 years ago. They may remember. So this is called Common Guidelines that NSF put. It talks about the different types, not necessarily the program, but just the common guidelines for writing research grants. NSF, this program, I find it, the program managers are very helpful. They try to help the faculty write good proposals. So they put a lot of information and resources online for people to check out. The webinars are extremely useful. Again, I'm sure everybody has the same experience with the other programs, but this field here has its own culture, has its own kind of resources. You really need to get intimately familiar with their culture and their resources. Maybe can go to next slide, Melissa. Okay, yeah. So like I said, we went through different phases. The first phase was submitting a proposal on, we want to develop a module, basically, right? And it was a small proposal, and we got it. And the second phase was scaling up that module to become multi-university, multi-module that focus on a certain theme. And then the third proposal that project that we are working on now was on basically working with the community, right? And we framed this proposal around the barriers that faculty face in adopting or developing innovative learning resources. So it's not necessarily about developing resources, but how can we reduce those barriers for people to adopt existing resources or develop their own. That was the overarching research question for us. How do we support faculty to develop, share, and adopt active learning innovations and alleviate existing barriers? So we had to frame the proposal around the theory of change. How do you make people change their behavior? And also the theory of diffusion of innovation. There's a theory in 2003 by Rogers, I forgot the full acronym there, but on how an innovation, basically a module, right? A module is an innovation. What are the factors that lead to diffusion of that innovation? If you are developing a module or a resource, what attributes you need to put there to make it adaptable by others? So that was the overarching, kind of theory behind our project. And you can see now why we are doing this workshop. Most of the time people will develop, and then by the end of the project, okay, here are some very nice modules, and they give it to people, say, please use it. Well, it doesn't work like that. So we are adopting another approach where we do this interactive development, right? Where we develop something and then we work with the community and get feedback and improve. And then the community also will have a buy-in and invest in it, and the cycle starts. Of course, whenever you write a proposal for NSF, you always have to keep your eye on student learning, because that's the ultimate goal, right? But this goal here can be very broad. If you have faculty development, that can address student learning as well, right? Of course, the most direct impact here is if you develop a resource or a module that students can learn from, right? So, so these were the two main goals that we. I'll be happy to talk with you more about. Again, my experience with writing these proposals. I enjoy it. It takes quite a bit of my time. I'm still active in my own technical research, but I find a lot of reward in working on these projects, especially when you see an impact, whether from a faculty member who benefited from whatever you developed, or from a student who likes the innovative resources. Okay, so maybe here I'll share some brief thoughts and then turn it over to Melissa after that. So basically what we want to do with HydroLearn is to encourage everybody to, or support people to share expertise and collaborate, which we are all doing now, right? So that's happening, I think. We went over how to adapt a module in HydroLearn, right? I think we did go over that, but once you publish, so this is a little bit of technical thing here. Once you publish a module, right? Once you publish it and make it public, I should say, make it public, and Jenny, correct me if I'm wrong, an automatic link is generated. Jenny, can you, or Melissa, do you want to share that screen from HydroLearn? I can show it really quick. Once you make your module public, there's a link that is automatically generated on HydroLearn. And anybody who has an instructor account on HydroLearn, and we control these instructor accounts. Anybody who has an instructor account on HydroLearn, a studio account basically, can download that link. Basically, they can download a copy of your resource or module, just like you did with the template module that Jenny and Melissa prepared. Then they can upload it into their own studio and it becomes technically theirs, right? So that's the most liberal and most, the full sharing capacity that you can do. You can see here the export link, that's right. So they export that, and then they import it into their own studio. They can modify it, they can use it as is. That's one way to share things, and they're already automated in HydroLearn. So people will discover your module, and if HydroLearn team provides them with a studio account, they can basically adopt your module, or what was the term yesterday, David, and those different copyright, they can...
Well, I mean, so they technically they can download the module and they can upload a copy of it into their own module. At the bottom of the page, it should say what the copyright is, and it's really on an honor system for whether they follow it or not. I mean, we don't have any technical digital rights management in HydroLearn.
Yes.
So it's basically an expectation that people are going to abide by the copyright that you assert.
Right. Of course, they can also, if they discover your module on HydroLearn, or if you invite them to use it, they don't have to copy and re-import it. They can just use the link that exists on HydroLearn, right? So they can send it to their own students, and the students can work on it, and so they don't have to go through the importing part. There
is a little bit of an issue there, because then if your students start working on some other instructor's module, that other instructor will start seeing their progress through the exercise and things like that.
True.
And that other instructor may not want to see that progress through the exercises.
Yes, true. That is true.
Especially if it's intermingled within the class that they are currently teaching. So it may be a good practice to keep separate copies. But there is actually an issue with, I'm not sure whether we've got it sorted out, whether if there's images in separate copies, they may not get fully transmitted.
No, that's actually, David, only is a problem only if you copy parts of the course. But if you copy...
Okay.
Yes. So those are the two basic modes for sharing or people using your own module. Is basically they can use the same link if they don't intend to modify anything in it, or they can also adapt it completely and repackage it if they want, of course, with the expectation that they will acknowledge the source module. I think we talked about it a lot, that when you develop your own module, provide as much adapter support tools and mechanisms as possible. So when you write your own module, think about other adapters who would use that. And really the adapter here is the professor, not the student, right? Because the student is the one the professor who's the one who's gonna make a decision for his or her students to adopt the resource. So think of the student, how this is beneficial from a learning perspective, but really the decision maker here is the professor on whether somebody will use your module or not, other than the casual students who come across the module and like it and they want to learn from it. But for others to use, it's really going to be the professor. This is something I learned from a program I participated with, NSF, called the I-Core, if you guys are familiar with that. And it was about customer discovery. If you develop a resource, who is your customer? And of course, the first answer that come into mind, the customer is a student. But really the customer here is maybe the professor who makes the decision to assign a module like that to his own students. So anyways, so these are some notes on how you can adapt, how you can, make people, adopt your own module. And I think Willie was, and many of us yesterday was talking about, can we use some of the modules that are there on HydroLearn? They are all public, they're all available. And, there's a lot of resources that are being developed in this workshop. I personally, will use many of them. And once they are public, once they are published, anybody can use them. So as long as you have an account there.
So our second objective with this grant is to support effective student learning. So Ahmad has talked to you about faculty adoption and how we are encouraging faculty adoption. We also hope that you've bought into the idea that authentic tasks can be engaging for students, but we need to also show this to NSF, right? That there's a proof of concept that this is a good way to teach, that these modules are effective. And so to kind of give you a little bit of framework of how we're thinking about supporting effective student learning, we have instructional content, the modules or the method of delivery, the method of delivering instruction. And then everything kind of within this circle or oval is really about what's happening within the student. So we deliver, but then what happens to the information or content that gets delivered? Well, students have motivations and they also have engagement. Those two things are a bit separate in that motivation is more of a trait that someone has. I'm sure that you've seen students who persevered and worked so hard, even beyond points when you yourself feel like you may have given up. Or conversely, maybe you've seen students who just don't seem motivated, even though you think that they have potential if they would just put their minds to it. That also relates to engagement. So engagement is how much you're doing right now in the moment. Are you doing your homework? Are you asking questions? Are you those kinds of moment-to-moment things? That's both motivation and engagement are changeable. But our theory here is that these modules will be more engaging for students. And so we're looking at, and then both motivation and engagement impact student competence. And when you have change in competence, that's what you have, that's what learning is. And so our goals with this project are to look at students' behavioral engagement and their competence over time. So I wanted to give you just kind of a sneak peek at some data. I just pulled the data down and analyzed it, did a very quick run through analysis yesterday. Full disclosure, I didn't even check all my assumptions, so these are very preliminary data. But from the students, from the data we were able to gather in the spring, we had, there were 32 students we had complete data for in the set that I pulled down yesterday. We looked at their own self-report of their learning as for students who completed the development of a design storm module. And those differences were statistically significant. Improvements, of course. Now, what does that mean? I mean, shouldn't everybody who participates in a module learn something from it? Yes. So these are very preliminary data. There are other ways that can analyze them to kind of give us a better picture, but they learned something, so that's positive. We also looked at their engagement across 4 factors: their engagement, their skills of engagement, which would be studying, taking notes, their performance in class, or their engagement in class, their emotional kind of connections, and then their participation. We found statistically significant increases, although just a small effect size, in their participation, their engagement in class. And so that kind of shows, or their engagement in the content, in their work. And so obviously we're still looking at these data more, but what I wanted to kind of give you a picture of is the type of data we're collecting. And so we're really collecting 2 forms of data consistently across all, that we're asking all of our fellows to help us collect. One is the student assessment of their own learning, and one is the course engagement. And the reason for that is because the more data we have, the better picture we can build of kind of looking back to our framework around behavioral engagement impacting student learning. So there's a lot of information on this slide, but there's really one point I want to make, which is that we're going to be using a pre-post design for our fellows in HydroLearn, which means that before you begin your HydroLearn instruction, we ask that you get informed consent from your students, that you administer the student engagement survey and the student assessment of learning survey, which are both in one link. It looks like one survey to students. That as you collect student work during the HydroLearn module, as they submit their learning activities and assignments and you collect those, one thing we'll ask in the informed consent is if they consent to allow us to look at their work. And then at the end, we'll do the student engagement and assessment survey again. We ask that you administer it. We'll send you a link with exactly what to say, or if you're teaching online, exactly what to put in your email to students. And then also, I like to invite students to participate in interviews because then I can get more details from them about what their experience was like. What I would really love to do is an ABA design. An ABA design means that there would be some time in the semester when maybe you're not using HydroLearn, a time when you are, and a time when you're not. And if we look at changes in students' engagement when they're not engaged in HydroLearn and when they are, if there's more change when they are engaged in HydroLearn, that would suggest that HydroLearn is more effective than a more traditional method of instruction. And so if any of you are interested in learning more about the ABA design, I would love to have volunteers for that. That means that would be more data collection, but it's the same data. So we would be administering that survey 4 times across the semester. Although if that doesn't quite work, we could do 3. Collecting student work at 2 points in time, and then everything else is basically the same. So that would give us a more robust analysis of the differences in using HydroLearn as compared to other methods of instruction.
I have a question.
Yes.
What is there a possibility of having some sections using HydroLearn and some sections not using HydroLearn? Thinking that maybe we have different professors and one adopts HydroLearn and one does not, and teaching the same course material?
That is absolutely another situation. I was under the impression that there aren't often multiple sections of intro hydrology courses or whatever, but if you have multiple sections, that would be a great way to do it.
There are often multiple sections of fluid mechanics. Since every civil engineering student is required to take that. Almost every engineering student is required to take fluid mechanics.
Gotcha. Well, absolutely. If you have sections that are using HydroLearn and sections that are not, that would be a great way to do it.
Another question, Melissa. So, so let's say we use the module in a university class, and do we need? So I know we need to get approval like from students so that they were willing to share their information. And they're willing to take that whatever survey they need to do. In addition to that, do we need to get approval from university, if any?
Excellent point out. Yes, you do, and those slides are coming up in a minute. Are there any other?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Are there any other questions about kind of the design, or this is a very overarching view? So to get more into the specifics, there are, oh, I even left something off here. A few pieces of data collection that we would like to gather. We would like to gather, well, we need to gather informed consent. That's not data, but that'll tell us whether or not students allow their data to be considered as part of our project. Of course, just because a student says no to informed consent, that does not have any bearing, of course, on their grade or whether or not they would participate in the module, just whether or not their data would be shared with us. One survey, which is administered both before and after you implement HydroLearn, your HydroLearn module, which would be, which that survey includes an engagement survey and the student assessment of learning gains, which is used widely in engineering education research. And then individual interviews with any students who would be willing. Typically, I get 1 to 2 students who volunteer per course per semester. And then student work if they consent. And students are allowed to consent to the survey, but not the work, or they can consent to all of these. So there's definitely room for student choice there. From you all, you'll remember at the very beginning, we collected informed consent from you. What we're hoping is to gather some data from you on how you decide to implement your module. Some of you may decide to assign the whole thing and have students do it outside of class individually. Some may have students do it collaboratively. Some may give class time. I'm sure you all will make different choices about how you decide to engage your students in the module. So we would, we'll kind of send out a survey towards the end of the semester looking at asking you how you implemented the module. Interviews those usually take about 30 minutes after the semester in which you teach your module. I really enjoy doing those interviews with the fellows because I just get such a great picture of what all your classes look like. And then a survey. We will send this to you after the semester in which you teach your module. So you'll complete the survey just at the end of the semester when you teach it. I know some of you will be teaching in the fall and others in the spring.
So I have another question.
Yes.
The module we're developing is like one of the only modules available for fluid mechanics, and it takes about 2 weeks to go through that. Could the interviews be done instead of waiting until the end of the term, but could the interviews be done in more timely, like right after the midterm where those are done, or just right after teaching it, instead of waiting to the end, so that it's more fresh for the students, on the student's mind, or is it important to put it at the end of the term?
Sure, so there are pluses and minuses to each. Of course, doing it more timely to the end of the module helps for students' memory and recollection, as you mentioned. The reason we typically do it after the semester is over is because I like to do them after grades are submitted. That way students don't feel any pressure to participate in interviews or they don't feel any pressure to say things that are particularly glowing about their professor. You know, I want them to be super, like, really honest and comfortable, which is the reason to do it once grades are submitted. Even though
is the professor doing the interviews, or would you be doing the interviews?
I do the interviews, but oftentimes, and the students haven't had, I mean, I've only ever done them after grades are submitted. Students don't have any, sometimes students are afraid that I will share what they've said with the professor, even though I assure them that I won't. And so that's where that kind of hesitancy comes from. But I can review our IRB proposal, and if we didn't put in that it will be only done after grades are submitted, then we could look at doing it earlier in the semester.
All right, because this module is relatively early in teaching fluid mechanics, so it might be more timely to do it during the term.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, so Tao was ahead of the game, so we're going to talk now about IRB. IRB is the Institutional Review Board. So the University of Louisiana at Lafayette has an approved IRB for this project. The project was found exempt, which basically says because it's pretty normal, you're collecting student work and student surveys of students in your courses, it's nothing really outside of the ordinary, that it's not considered a high need for reviewing the research. That being said, every institution considers and deals with IRB differently. So for instance, when a professor at LSU wanted to collect data for us, his IRB said, not a problem, we don't need a review because UL said it's exempt, so we're not even going to look at it. We agree with UL, that's fine. Whereas I think David Spellman is on the call. He had to go through the entire full IRB process with all the paperwork. So every IRB takes us a little bit differently. So we're going to get a jump start on this now and hopefully get this all approved quickly. So there is, I linked it here, an IRB subfolder in our shared fellows folder. So, and then there's a document in here about getting IRB approval. So the first thing that we need to do is email your IRB to see if we need IRB approval from them to gather this data. This is the point at which LSU's IRB said, nope, you're fine, and all that fellow needed was that email. Whereas, as I mentioned, poor David had to go all the way through the IRB application. I have done, I don't even know how many IRB applications in my time, so I am happy to walk you through it. We also have drafted the email text for you that you can send to your IRB. So you'll need to search on your university's website for the IRB email address. It's usually irb@maine.edu, at louisiana.edu. They're not super creative, but that's good. And then you can just copy and paste that email text and send it to them, copying Imad and I. Obviously, fill in the name of your university. So this is kind of the first step. Let's see, let me check some questions that are coming in. Oh yeah, David had to go through the city training. That's kind of painful. Oh, Imad has pointed out that this is incorrect. So Mark, I will work with you on yours. You probably need to do it at the institution where you teach. Are there questions about, are there other questions about this? So one of our goals is today for you to get that email off to your IRB. Usually they respond quickly, and for the most part it's painless. There are a few cases, so for instance, David Spellman no longer has to do it because he's done it all. Once you have an IRB at your institution, it's good for a year. Who else doesn't need to do it? If you are at an institution where we already have approval, like Utah State, then you do not need to work on getting new approval. We can add you to an existing approval. So if you have a question about if there was a fellow from your university previously, and if we might already have IRB approval, let me know, because the less painful this process can be for you, the better. So what we were wanting to do now, tomorrow's our very last day together as a whole group during the hackathon. And so we wanted to know if there are any particular topics that you would like us to revisit tomorrow. So Jenny has put a poll in here. And if you would let us know, we really tried to address your questions and topics on Friday, and we will try to do so again. Yeah, Gianna, so it doesn't matter if they're in the same system, unfortunately. But however, what it does mean is that UNO is much more likely to just approve it because they're more likely to trust you out.
Melissa, would you like me to share my screen so we can see the responses?
That would be great, yeah. And Mauricio, I would love to have you get more involved in the data analysis. If there's anyone who has an interest in that, then you can hold off on sending the email and maybe send me a message in the chat, because I would love to have people, if you want to get in on that, to get in on that with us.
So for the folks who are putting Jupyter Notebook integration, are there specific aspects of it that may be needed? I guess I'm asking what more I need to show than the module I've already put together.
Dave, I added if people are interested in the software environment component of the notebooks and how that's all going to work, that could be a specific sub or integrate. I'm not sure what integration is exactly.
as a sort of a question and answer session where we all go into a breakout group and just explore and discuss.
I'm curious if someone could elaborate in what you mean between the process for module checkoff and then the steps needed after the module is complete in terms of content and activities. What is the difference between these two?
There probably is no difference. I submitted what does the end game look like for module checkoff, so.
And I did the other one. I think like it's very similar.
Okay.
I was just wondering, you know, once we are done with putting in everything, what are the extra steps? You mentioned this throughout this couple of weeks, but I think it would be useful to have a list here so that we make sure that we don't miss anything.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea too. We'll be sure to visit that tomorrow. We'll probably tie in this bottom one, resources from the team that'll be available after the conclusion of the workshop. We'll tie all that in. To answer this bottom question, I can do that really quickly. Once your module is available to the public, if someone exports that module, you get an automatically generated email letting you know that your module has been exported. All right, so it looks like this is slowed down. It seems that everyone's had an opportunity to respond. We'll jot all these down and we will visit all that we can tomorrow. Stop sharing. Pass it back to you, Melissa.
Hey, I had a follow-up question about the IRB stuff, having been looking at the folder. So the thing that we're supposed to send to our IRB is just the 2-page UL approval exempt. Is that correct? Because it doesn't say anything about what the study actually does or what we're going to collect. I thought they would want to know that.
So that depends on your university.
Okay.
Some universities will see that our IRB or that UL's IRB marked it exempt and we'll be fine with it. Other universities will say, no, we want the whole thing. What if they say we want more information? Will keep me in the loop at every step, but if they say they want more information, I have the whole thing and I will work with you to get that out. If sometimes then they want you to put the whole thing in their own system, answering their own slightly different questions, and I will also help you write all of that if your university is one of those persnickety IRBs.
Okay, thanks very much.
You're welcome. All right, so I'm sure it's been at the top of your list that we will be having post-hackathon meetings. I'm just being sarcastic there, so I'm sure you have other things on your mind. We did say at the outset that we will have 4 post-hackathon meetings. Those are gonna be kind of like, I think of them kind of like a conference where you'll present your modules to one another. Everyone will have about 10 minutes to present their module, I believe is the time we looked at. Imad, correct me if I'm wrong. have about 10 minutes to present your module, and in this way you'll get to see one another's, give feedback to each other. Our goal is to do this, you can see from the doodle poll there, the last week in July or the first week in August. So we're hoping to find 2 days each week where we can put those in. So go ahead and take a minute.
Melissa, we said 20 minutes total for presentation, and whether that's 15 presentation, 5 question, or 10 presentation, 10-minute question. We didn't really,
Okay.
but 20 minutes total for 2.
All right, so 20 minutes total. And so we will, but however, we will give you specific checklist of all the things coming up for the end of HydroLearn Fellows Hackathon and everything, with wrapping up your module and preparing for that presentation. So we will give you specific guidelines. I appreciate your compliment, David. All right, so I see lots of people working on their doodle polls. That's great. If you'll give me just 10 seconds of your attention, I promise I'll let you finish that. So we have 3 goals for you during your work time today. 1 is to complete the doodle poll. 2 is to email your IRB. And 3 is to continue working on your module. So Jenny is going to go ahead and put you in your breakout rooms now. And if you would please do the email to your IRB and the doodle poll first, and then go ahead and get started working on your module. We'll meet back here at the normal time this afternoon. I will stay here in the main room for a while, so if you have any questions about the IRB or the doodle poll, feel free to hang out. So Jenny, will you open those rooms for us? All right, it looks like everybody's back with us. I hope you all had a really productive partner work session this afternoon. So we're gonna go into our content groups here in just a minute. Hopefully Jenny is putting those groups together for us now.
You know.
And one thing, a suggestion that I wanted to make to our content guides is maybe to consider the time that we have left. So we have about an hour, and the number of groups that you have, and maybe divide up the time. I know some of the groups have been going over, which has been great conversations, but maybe dividing up the time and kind of allotting time ahead of time will be helpful, allotting a number of minutes per group. Of course, that's at your discretion, but Christina calls me the Time Lord for a reason, so I will make my Time Lord suggestions.
I think you might just be referring to my session yesterday.
I don't think I've been in a content group session that ended on time yet, which is fine. There have been great conversations. But so, and in kind of an effort too to streamline those conversations, I think it would be helpful if you consider when you go to present today, rather than thinking about presenting everything that you've done, think about something that maybe you spent a lot of time or effort focusing on today. Something you are working on today that you are having difficulty with, maybe put out a problem to the group and try to get some ideas, or something that you feel particularly proud of, like, hey, you know, I took 3 hours to make this one unit, but it's pretty amazing. So consider one of those things when you choose what you want to present to the group. And how are we doing there, Jenny?
Doing pretty good.
Erin, I had considered that I was the common element in that every group I've been in has gone late. Yes, I have had that concern. So Jenny, go ahead and open the groups then for us. As everyone moves into their groups, be thinking about what it is you would want to share with your team, and content leaders be dividing 55 by your number of teams.